The biplane in the Sonic franchise is fascinating for all the wrong reasons. The naming is inconsistent, the design is weird, the ownership is notable, I suppose. My point is, the lore of the tornado is weird and I want to talk about it. I've talked about it a bit in the past in my old Sonic Unleashed video, but as is the case with most of my older videos, I don't really like that one and don't recommend watching it. I also just get some stuff about the tornado wrong in that video. I just noticed some weird stuff with the plane in that game, which I'll be sure to cover shortly. The very first appearance of the tornado is in Sonic the Hedgehog 2 on the Sega Genesis. There's not much notable here other than the fact that Tails is flying it, but it's owned by Sonic. This is only notable because Sonic doesn't own every tornado, only this one. It's also why Sonic's name is plastered on the side of the plane. During the cutscene where you're flying up to the Death Egg, a rocket engine is attached to the underside of the plane, presumably to give it the juice to make it to a satellite before it gets too high. After you fight Mechasonic and the Death Egg robot, the engine is gone, which makes sense. It likely just dropped off like a rocket stage or something. It then shows up in Sonic 3, which takes place immediately after with the rocket engine. Why is the engine there? It makes sense that it would have fallen off because there's no way it could land with it there, so why is it back? The lore has been inconsistent and weird through the entire franchise, I guess. I don't understand why it's here, let alone why they didn't fix it for Origins, but whatever, it's a pretty small thing. There are much more grievous and explicit inconsistencies later. The tornado shows up in the Sonic Triple Trouble special stages, as well as the credits of Knuckles Chaotix and the opening of Sonic the Fighters, but the next significant appearance is in Sonic Adventure, and quite a bit happens in this game regarding the tornado. At the beginning of the game, Tails is seen flying and crashing a plane, but this is distinctly not the tornado. Instead, it's the prototype tornado, which leads Sonic to asking why Tails doesn't just use his plane. The prototype tornado is different from the tornado in that it's powered by a Chaos Emerald. When the egg carrier first shows up, Sonic and Tails attempt to fly up to it in the actual tornado before being shot down with it destroyed. The prototype tornado then gets finished and becomes a Tornado 2, a different plane entirely, that's used to fly up to the egg carrier successfully this time, and it's able to transform into an X shape to go faster. Unfortunately, that form doesn't have landing gear, so they crash onto the deck. Big story ends with him flying the Tornado 2 back to the Mystic Ruins, back to his little hut, and crashing the Tornado 2 there. As a side note, it's hilarious that Big flies the tornado at all, and especially that it's pretty important to its lore. From there, the emerald gets stolen by Chaos. After finishing Tails' story, you get a little picture depicting Tails standing next to a fully repaired tornado, the original. How he got it out of wherever it crashed is a mystery to me, but I'm willing to look past that, if for no reason other than my sanity. There's a lot going on in the next few games, and I'll try to make it as simple as possible, but this is where it gets weird. First of all, the normal tornado shows up in a few more games. It's used in Sonic Advance in a couple cutscenes and Sonic Rivals to reach a certain zone, but then in Sonic Rush Adventure it has 2 seats. That's fine, I suppose it got an upgrade, but then some confusing things happen. First of all, in Sonic 4 it shows up with the classic design, but that's fine, it takes place right after Sonic 3. In Sonic Lost World, which has to take place after Generations and Colors because of the Wisps, the tornado only has 1 seat. This means that Colors, Generations, and Lost World must take place before Rush Adventure since it has 2 seats again in Frontiers. This could definitely inform a whole timeline theory, which I'll probably make a video on eventually because there's no way anyone's considered the number of seats the tornado has in each game to inform their timeline theory. Anyway, it also shows up in Mania with the classic design, but that's a different timeline which was established by Forces, and even if it wasn't, it could be chalked up to Phantom Ruby shenanigans. It does show up one more time in Frontiers, in the opening when they're flying to the Starfall Islands in the first place, and then again after the credits when they're leaving. The Tornado 2, the one that got basically destroyed, does show up a couple other times, somehow. The first time it shows up is in Sonic Heroes in its X form, but distinctly without the Chaos Emerald, so I have no idea how it's flying. That theme continues into Sonic Advance 3, where it can even transform while you're riding it, but it still doesn't have an emerald powering it, so I don't know what's going on there. It exists in Sonic Riders, but Riders may as well be a completely different universe at this point. Sonic X is definitely an entirely different universe, but it deserves its own paragraph later. The next variant of the tornado, the Tornado 3, aka the Cyclone, is one of the most well-known variants just because it appears in Sonic Adventure 2, one of the most popular Sonic games. It is a plane, but it can also transform into a mech, which is how you use it most of the time. It can also transform into a car, which is how you use it in the Route 101 stage. It's important to point out that the transformation of the Cyclone into having feet is a good response to the Tornado 2, simply not having landing gear when it's transformed, and I think this is a really funny overreaction from Tails. The Cyclone shows up in Shadow the Hedgehog, which takes place after Heroes, so I don't know why Tails didn't just have the Cyclone in that game. Anyway, in Shadow, it's used in the intro cutscene to Circus Park, where it's being powered by a Chaos Emerald, despite definitely being the Cyclone because it has Tornado 3 written on the side. Why is it powered by an emerald here? It's given a cameo in Sonic Unleashed and Generations and some dialogue, but it doesn't show up again until Frontiers? What? Why does Tails use the Cyclone in Frontiers when the tornado was right there? I guess it's not, like, real, and a lot of Tails' story in this game revolves around what he did in the adventure games, but I don't understand why they had to pull in the Cyclone here instead of just letting you fly around in a little tornado. I think that would have been more fun, anyway. Before I talk about the final tornado variant in the games, I want to cover the tornado in Sonic X. It's not too complicated, thankfully. The tornado originally belonged to Sonic before Tails upgraded it into the Tornado 2. That's right, in this continuity they're the same plane, just upgraded. Sonic gave Tails the tornado at this point, and that's how we first see it in the show. From there, Tails wants to power a tornado with the Chaos Emerald and builds an entirely new plane, the X-Tornado. The X-Tornado can transform like the Cyclone, but is entirely unique and only shows up in the anime. Later on, the Tornado 2 is upgraded into the Hyper Tornado, which is distinct from the X-Tornado and is actually literally just an upgraded Tornado 2, like how the Tornado 2 is just an upgraded Tornado in this version. That's kinda it. There's nothing complicated here, not like in the games. The final Tornado variant in the games, the Tornado 1, because the naming scheme wasn't complicated enough, shows up in Unleashed and Generations, and that's literally it. It's codenamed the Tornado 3, which is written on the side for some ungodly reason, as opposed to the Tornado 3, the Cyclone. I don't understand why it was named like this, nor why it was used so little. It was seemingly purpose-built for Tails and Sonic to use, since there's the cockpit seat that Tails sits in, and another spot for Sonic to stand. It seems to just be a straight-up upgrade from the single-seater version of the original Tornado in every way, though. It does have an X-form that likely doesn't have landing gear, but that doesn't come up as an issue through the game, meaning Tails probably realized he can just transform back before landing. It largely looks similar to the original Tornado, but is distinctly different. In Generations, it only appears in one mission where Tails flies alongside Sonic and races him to the end of Green Hill. It also shows up on a billboard in Speed Highway in the same game, and that billboard is later reused in Mario and Sonic at the Winter Olympic Games 2014. Now that you know all the appearances of the different versions of the Tornado, I can express all my dissatisfactions with them. First of all, why is the Tornado 1 called that? The Tornado 1 is the worst tornado by far, and is honestly what catalyzed this video in the first place. The name is dumb, especially considering it's codenamed the Tornado 3 and has that written on the side, which led to me looking into it in the first place. Why wasn't the Tornado 1 used more? If they had just used the Tornado 1 in Lost World, the timeline shenanigans from earlier wouldn't have even happened at all. Sonic is standing on the wings of the tornado in the first place, so there's no reason to not use it. The Tornado 2 being in its X form in Sonic Heroes was a nice touch. It's likely that it's faster than the Cyclone, and they needed the speed to catch up with Sonic. But how is it powered? It was specifically designed around being powered by an emerald. How did they catch up with Sonic at all, especially without an emerald, even assuming there's some sort of backup power? Why is the Cyclone powered by a Chaos Emerald in Shadow when they could have just used the Tornado 2 instead? I guess I just wanted the Cyclone because Tails is specifically trying to get rings from Eggman, but why can't Tails just have the emerald instead of it being used to power something they've never been used to power before? The Rush Adventure 2-seater otherwise has the same design as the Adventure Tornado, but the Lost World and Frontiers tornadoes look more like the classic version, with the Frontiers one being a 2-seater so they could bring Amy along. Actually, speaking of Amy, how does she get off of Prison Island in Adventure 2 if the Cyclone only has one seat? How does she even get there in the first place? Whatever, that's not even just the Cyclone, it's confusing there. I've been confused by the tornado ever since I played Unleashed for the first time. This doesn't clear anything up at all, but it's fun to think about and go way too in depth with, so I don't really care. I had fun researching all this, and I hope this video was at least a little bit fun to watch. I never thought there would actually be enough lore to turn this into a full video, but I'm really glad there was, because this is a topic that has been bugging me for a very long time, like over a year, and every single time there is a new tornado variant introduced, like every time I see one in a new game or whatever, or an appearance of an older tornado variant, I think of this and just need to get the thoughts out of my head. Like I just started watching Sonic X recently, and as soon as I saw the tornado, I'm watching it with someone, and as soon as I saw the tornado, we both like looked at each other. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I love you all, and I don't know how to end this.